Hello students, welcome to my channel Biology Foundation. This is part 5 of Unit-3 Structure and Functions of a Plant. So in previous videos, we discussed about root system and in shoot system in detail. We have discussed about the functions and modifications of stem, the functions and modifications of leaf, and what is the basic structure of a flower, and we have discussed the first step of reproduction, which is pollination, where we discussed about self pollination and cross pollination, and even the pollinators or the agents of pollination, which is wind, water, insects, and in some cases, even animals help in pollination, right? So, today let's discuss the second step of reproduction, and then we'll talk about fruit, its function, seed, which later develops into a plant. And then end our lecture and even this unit with functions of a plant. Okay. So as just now as I told, reproduction consists of two steps. One is pollination and the second one is fertilization. Okay. Pollination is the first main step in reproduction. For successful reproduction to take place, pollination has to occur. What is pollination? Transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower within the same plant, or from one flower to another flower within the same plant, or transfer of pollen grains from anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of different plants belonging to same species or of the same kind. Then successful pollination occurs, right? So, after pollination, the next event is fertilization. What is fertilization? Fertilization happens when the pollen grain lands on the stigma. Okay, if you see, this is the structure of pistil or carpel, right? We know that pistil or carpel is the female reproductive part of a flower consisting of ovary, style, and stigma, right? So basically, when a pollen grain, for example, if the pollen grain of a hibiscus flower falls on the stigma of hibiscus flower belonging to another plant, but both are hibiscus species, right? So there is successful pollination. Once pollination occurs, when there is successful pollination occurring, once this pollen grain falls on the stigma, the pollen grain germinates. Okay, that means it divides and forms a structure known as pollen tube. Okay, usually a single pollen grain falls on the stigma and forms pollen tube. Now, here in this case, if you see, two pollen grains have fallen on the stigma. Now, out of these two, only one will form the pollen tube in most cases. Okay. So, here you can see that the pollen grain fell on the stigma and it forms pollen tube. Okay. Why is the pollen grain forming the pollen tube? If you remember, I told you that stamen is the male reproductive organ of a flower which contains anther and filament, and the anther contains what in it? Pollen grains. And pollen grains have what? Two male gametes, right? Now, what landed on the stigma? The pollen grain landed on the stigma. This pollen grain only is forming what? Pollen tube. And inside the pollen tube, who are present? The two male gametes are present, right? Now, if you remember, I told you the female reproductive organ in a flower is carpel or pistil, and it consists of three parts in it, that is ovary, style, and the stigma, right? Inside the ovary, what do you have? Ovules are present, and inside each ovule you have one egg or female gamete is seen, right? So now what's happening? This pollen that, let's consider this structure where you have ovary, style, and stigma. Inside the ovary, let's assume you have ovule, and inside one ovule you have one egg cell, right? Now let's assume there are two pollen grains that have fallen on the stigma, but out of these two pollen grains, only one will germinate and form the pollen tube. Now inside, so this pollen tube, it travels down the style, okay, and reaches the ovary and goes inside the ovule, and reaches the egg. Who is present inside the pollen tube? Two male gametes are present inside. These male gametes want to reach the egg. Clear? So basically here the pollen grain germinates to form pollen tube, and this pollen tube contains two male gametes in it which are traveling down to reach the ovule, and inside the ovule you have one female gamete. Clear? Now what is fertilization? When do you say fertilization happen? When there is fusion of male and female gamete. Okay, so the male gamete and the female gamete, when they meet and form a single cell, when these two cells combine together and they fuse, their contents fuse, then it results in formation of a single cell, which you call it as zygote. Zygote will be formed. Okay, so during this process, what actually is happening, for successful fertilization to take place, successful pollination has to occur. That means first the pollen grain of the same species should fall on the stigma of the same kind. If hibiscus pollen grains fall on the stigma of rose, or if the pollen grains of rose fall on the stigma of mango, then there won't be successful pollination. For pollination to be successful, the transfer of pollen grains from anther should occur on the stigma of the plant of the same kind. That is quite important, or it's the key. Okay, and once there is successful pollination, once the pollen grain lands on the stigma, first what happens? Pollen tube formation occurs. This pollen tube carries what in it? Two male gametes. Now these male gametes, they travel to the ovule, and inside the ovule you have a single female gamete or egg cell. Okay, now what is fertilization? Fusion of male and female gamete to form a single celled zygote is called fertilization. Okay, now out of the two male gametes which are present inside the pollen tube, one male gamete will fuse with the egg cell. One, if you remember, I told you the symbol for male is that, right? One male gamete will fuse with the female gamete to form a single celled zygote. Okay, while the other male gamete fuses with, not with the egg, because inside the ovule you have only one egg. That one egg will fuse with the male gamete and forms the zygote, whereas the other male gamete will fuse with one more cell inside the ovule, not the egg cell. There is another cell inside the ovule and it forms the endosperm. Okay, but mainly the one male gamete, out of the two male gametes, one of the male gametes fuses with the egg to form zygote, while the other male gamete fuses with the cell inside the ovule and forms the endosperm. Okay, so pollination is transfer of pollen grains onto the anther. From anther to the stigma of a flower. Fertilization is the fusion of male and female gamete to form a single celled zygote. Okay, let me erase this. So here I have just put a picture of pollination. As you can see here, pollination is being helped by insects. So insects are acting as pollinators in this case. So, and in such a case, can I call this as entomophily, right? Entomology is the study of insects. Entomophily is taking help of insects for pollination. Here, what's happening? The bee is sucking nectar from this flower, and during this process, pollen grains get stuck onto its body. And once this bee uh, goes and visits another flower, what happens? It dusts its pollen grains onto the plant, causing pollination to take place, right? And if you see here, this is a structure of ovule. Now, these are your stamens. Okay, you have the anther and the stigma. And what is this? Sepals. And what are these? These are petals. Here you have the sepal. This is the male reproductive organ, which is stamen, and group of stamens is androecium. And here, if you see, you have the stigma, style, and ovary. Inside the ovary, if you see, these are the ovules, and inside ovule you find a female gamete, which is your egg cell. Okay, so basically, only when the pollen grain germinates and it forms pollen tube, only then can the male gamete reach the female gamete, and fusion can occur, resulting in formation of a single celled zygote. And this process only we call it as fertilization. Okay, now after fertilization, once fertilization happened, once the male and female gamete fuse and there is zygote formation, okay, what actually happens is the ovule which is present, okay, inside the ovule only you have the egg, right? And the egg fuses with the male gamete to form zygote. Now this ovule, after fertilization, it forms the seed. And what happens to the ovary? It forms the fruit. So what are the post products or products after fertilization? Seeds and fruits, where ovary develops into fruit and ovules develop into seeds, right? If you see here, you have mango fruits, and inside the mango fruit you have the seed. Basically, this is the ovary. After fertilization, it became the fruit. And this is the ovule that became the seed. And inside the seed, you have your zygote, which develops into embryo and later gives rise to a complete plant. Clear? So basically, for successful reproduction to take place in plants, there are two key events that must happen. First is pollination, and second is fertilization, where pollination is transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of flower of plants belonging to same species, and fertilization is the fusion of male and female gametes to form a single celled zygote. And once fertilization happens, the ovary develops. That means once there is fusion, that that gets completed, then the ovary develops into fruit and the ovules develop into seeds. Clear? And how many male gametes are present in each pollen grain? Two male gametes, out of which one will fuse with the egg cell to form zygote, and the other will fuse with another cell in the ovule, not the egg cell, and results in formation of endosperm. Try to understand, ovule contains only one female gamete, which is one egg, whereas the pollen grain has two male gametes in it. Okay, now let's understand about fruits. Fruits are nothing but your ripened ovary. As I told you, after fertilization, this ovary only completely gets ripened and it forms the fruit. Now, fruit contains what? It has fruit wall, which you call it as pericarp, and seeds. What does the fruits have? We all know fruits have a peel around it or an outer covering around it, that is called as the fruit wall. And then later, inside the fruit, you have the seeds. So, after fertilization, try to understand sepals and petals. They wither and die. Okay, wither means they start falling and they simply, like, they die, because if you remember, what is the main function of sepals and petals? Sepals main function is to protect the flower in the bud stage. What is the main function of petals? To attract pollinators for pollination. Now, during after fertilization, is there any need for sepals and petals? Not required, because already pollination has happened, already fertilization took place. So that's the reason, once fertilization happens, sepals and petals, they wither and die. Okay, and ovary develops into fruit and ovules develop into seeds. So if you see the fruit, it has fruit wall around it and consists and has seed inside it. Okay, some fruits have single seeds, like for example mango, avocado. The fruit has only single seed, but certain fruits, most of the fruits, they have multiple seeds in them. For example, banana has many seeds in it, papaya also has many seeds, tomato, pea, right, watermelon, all this, pumpkin, such these fruits, they have many seeds in them, right? So the number of seeds can vary from one species to another species. Now in some plants, so basically what is pericarp? It is the fruit wall. Okay, and inside the fruit you have seeds. Basically, in some species, in some plants, the pericarp is differentiated again into three layers. Differentiated means again it is divided, subdivided into three layers. Epicarp, or the outer layer, and this outer layer usually is the one which you discard. Like for example, I'll explain you with an example, then you'll understand. Okay, and mesocarp is the edible part. Edible part means it is the part which we actually eat, and endocarp usually is the tough inner part, okay, a hardened part. So if you see, best example is mango. In mango, the pericarp is divided or again redivided into three layers. The outer layer, which you call it as the mango peel, is the epicarp, which we basically discard or throw. What is mesocarp? It is the fleshy part which we eat. The juicy fleshy part is the mesocarp, and the toughened endocarp is the layer around the seed. Okay. So in some plants, the pericarp, not in all plants, usually fruit is surrounded by fruit wall, which is called as pericarp, and inside the fruit you find the seeds. Because ovary is present inside ovule, ovary develops into fruits, ovules develop into seeds. So obviously seeds will be present inside the fruit. Again, I'm telling, you have the ovary, you have the style and the stigma. This ovary only develops into fruit, and inside the ovary you have ovule. This ovule develops into seed, and inside this you have the zygote, which is formed by the fusion of male and female gamete, right? So the seed has zygote in it. Clear? So basically, the fruit is surrounded by fruit wall or pericarp and consists of seeds in it. And in some plants, the pericarp is again differentiated or divided into three layers: epicarp, mesocarp, and endocarp. Epicarp is the outer layer, which is usually discarded. It is leathery in most of the plants, and mesocarp is sweet. It is the fleshy part, edible part, and the endocarp is the hard layer, inner layer, which is formed. Okay. And I told you, from like the number of seeds varies from species to species. Some plants can have a single seed, like avocado, mango, right, berries, something of that sort. But in some plants there are innumerable seeds, like banana, papaya, tomatoes, watermelon, pea, pumpkin, right? Now, a key difference that you need to understand: what's the difference between vegetable and fruit? In science or in biology, when I use the term fruit, that means it is the ripened ovary part, or I can say it is the product which is formed after fertilization. After successful fertilization in plants, ovary develops into fruit. Then what is vegetable? It can be any part of the plant. Vegetable can be a leaf. For example, in spinach plant, the leaves are used as vegetable. So what is vegetable? Any part of plant that can be cooked and eaten. Or for example, potato. What is it? It's a vegetable because you are taking the underground stem, which is like the underground stem is used as the edible part, which we call it as tubers. Yes or no? So it's a vegetable. Any part of the stem that you cook and eat, it's vegetable. Fruit is ripened ovary. We use the term fruit for ripened ovaries. Clear? Now let's understand what is the main function of a fruit. What does fruit have in it? It has seeds in it, right? Fruits act as protection for the seeds. First, you try to understand, why should the seeds be protected? Why should the seeds be protected? Try to understand. I told you just now. You have the ovary, which extends into a tube-like structure called style, and then you have the knob-like structure known as stigma. Yes or no? This is the style and ovary. Pollen grain lands on the stigma, and inside the ovary, who is present? Ovule. Inside ovule, you have a sorry, single male gamete. Sorry, female gamete. So this is ovary, ovule, female gamete or egg cell. Now, when there is successful pollination, pollen tube, it travels down all the way, and inside the pollen tube, who is there? Male gamete. This male gamete fuses with the female gamete and forms zygote. Okay. So after fertilization, who is there inside the ovule? Zygote. Can I call after fertilization this as ovule? No, seed. And what does ovary form? Fruit. Try to understand, inside the fruit who is present? Seed is present. Inside seed, who is present? Zygote. Zygote must be protected because it develops into the sapling or seedling or the future plant. So seeds must be protected, and who is actually protecting the seed? Fruit. And protecting from whom? From animals. or from unfavorable conditions. Clear? And fruit stores food material. We all know fruits are rich in vitamins and minerals. We eat fruits, they're rich in fiber. So they store food material in them. And fruits help in dispersal of seeds. This point I'll explain you in the upcoming slides in this video only. But basically, what are the functions of fruit? It protects the seed because seed has zygote in it, which later develops into a plant, and seeds store food material in them, making which are rich source of vitamins and minerals along with fiber. And seeds and fruits also help in dispersal of seeds. So fruits play a very important role in protection of the seeds, in storage of food material, and in dispersal of seeds. Here you can see coconut seed. These are basically seeds having tufts of hair. Okay, we'll understand why they have those hair, why the seeds are covered with hair like structures and all. But basically, seeds contain zygote in them, which later develops into saplings. So seeds must be protected. Who is protecting the seeds? Fruits are enclosing the seeds and protecting them from animals and from unfavorable conditions. Okay, and fruits store food material and they help in dispersal of seeds. Now let's understand about seeds. Even in the first slide, I told you in plants, there are various kinds of plants, and each plant produces different types of fruit, and each fruit can enclose seeds of various shapes and of various sizes. I mean, the seeds which are produced by plants can vary in their shape, can vary in their size, vary in their color. Like, for example, if you see the guava seeds, they're quite small, right? And a whitish or yellowish in color. And these are seeds of pumpkin. Here you have seeds of apple, seeds of watermelon, seeds of grapes, seeds of mango. Some seeds are large in size, some are very small, some are oval shaped, some are maybe droplet in shape, right? Some are large in size, some are small in size, some are colorful, like if you see apple seeds and the watermelon seeds are brownish black, okay, whereas pumpkin seeds they are greenish in color. Guava seeds again they are yellowish or whitish. Mango seeds are also again whitish, so they vary in their size, vary in their color, vary in their form or shape, okay. And these seeds they are products after fertilization and formed from ovule, right? The ovule only develops into seeds. And as we discussed earlier, uh, in plant species, there can be, in some plants, there can be only one seed. The fruit has only one seed, like in mango or avocado. Or in certain plants, there can be many seeds, like watermelon, it has many seeds in it. Pumpkin, again, many seeds. Right. Now, what does the seed contain in it? That's more important. The seed contains zygote, which later develops into embryo. What is embryo? Just imagine something like this. When a mother has a, uh, the fetus in her womb, right? Initially, in the first month, you can see that it's the zygote which divides continuously. How much time does it take for the baby to form in the womb? It takes 9 months, right? Immediately, once the parents know that there is a child, when the mother knows that there's a child growing in her womb, that doesn't mean the next day the baby comes out, right? We know that it's a process which takes 9 months time, where the zygote which is formed in the womb, it divides continuously to develop into an embryo, and at the end of ninth month you can see the fetus which is completely developed with two legs, two hands, brain, all the internal organs completely developed, ears, eyes are completely formed, right? So it takes 9 months. In the same way, once the male and female gamete fuse, zygote is formed. That doesn't mean immediately plant is formed. No, the zygote undergoes many series of divisions to give rise to embryo. Okay, and this embryo later develops into plant. And when can a zygote develop into embryo? Only when there are favorable conditions. What do I mean by saying favorable conditions? That means if I have a seed of tomato plant and I sow the seed in the soil, but I'm not providing any water to the plant, and even light is not sufficient, there is no proper air, no space, no proper space for the seed, then in such conditions the seed will not germinate. Germinate means where the zygote has to develop into plant. This process you call it as germination. Okay, but here you have sown the seed, but you are not providing all the necessary requirements for the seed to develop into plant. Just like if you are if the baby is in the mother's womb, mother has to eat properly, must take rest properly, right, for the baby, and she has to eat and drink properly, because whatever food she's eating, that's what is going for the baby, right? So in the same way, for the seeds, for the zygote which is present inside the seed to develop into a plant, first it has to be nourished properly, right? So basically the seed contains what in it? It has the embryo and it has the cotyledons. What are these cotyledons? Basically cotyledons, they store food in them and provide the food to the zygote or the developing embryo. Clear? Try to understand. Inside the seed you have the embryo, and this embryo is surrounded by cotyledon. Either it can be one cotyledon if it is a monocot, or two cotyledons if it is a dicot. Monocots are basically your rice, maize, wheat. Okay, dicots are mango, neem, people. All these plants are dicots, where the seed is surrounded by two cotyledons. So the seed has embryo and cotyledons in it. So as soon as there is fusion of male and female gamete, the structure that is formed is zygote. This zygote undergoes continuous divisions and number of divisions to form the embryo, and later the embryo develops to form seedling or sapling and forms the plant. Okay, now for this process to occur, there should be favorable conditions. What do I mean by favorable conditions? Appropriate water must be provided, sufficient amount of light, air, proper space must be provided for the seed to grow comfortably in the soil. Okay, so during this process of germination, the zygote which is present inside the seed first develops into embryo, and later it develops into a seedling or sapling. Now try to understand the cotyledons and the embryo are attached to a axis, okay, to cotyledons as well as your uh, embryo, they get attached to a short curved like structure that is called axis. Now to this axis, now if you consider this is a seed, okay, you see a small structure that starts developing first, which grows downwards into the soil. This is called radical. The initial structure that is formed, this is called radical, from the, like, as the embryo starts developing. And there is one more structure which is growing upwards, that is called plumule. And this radical only gives rise to root, and those roots which are formed from radical, they are called as true roots. If you remember, I explained you this in my part 1 video of Unit 3, structure and functions of plant, when we were discussing about types of roots, true roots and adventitious roots. So roots which develop from the radical, they are called true roots. If you see here, during germination process, when you provide sufficient amount of sunlight, water, air, nutrients, everything to the seed, the soil, like you sow the seed and the soil is rich in nutrients, you daily pour water, see that sufficient amount of sunlight is being exposed to the seed, then what happens? Slowly the seed starts germinating. Germinating means where the zygote starts dividing to form the embryo, and during this development of embryo, first there will be a small structure that grows in down into the soil. This we call it as radical, and radical later develops into root. And there is one more structure that grows upward, which you call it as plumule, and this plumule gives rise to the shoot or the stem. Okay, and during this process, when the zygote is getting developed into embryo, someone should give energy, no, someone should provide food to the plant, because to the seeds, who is providing it? Cotyledons. They act as reserve food material. They provide food to the embryo, because The seeds cannot take the nutrients from the soil because they don't have roots are not yet developed, right? So in such a stage, who is providing nourishment to the embryo? It is basically your cotyledons. And once the roots are formed, then the roots will extract nutrients from the soil and provide it to the growing plant. And as the plant develops, what is happening? Leaves are formed. And once leaves are formed, what will happen? Photosynthesis is performed and the plant itself will produce food that it requires. Clear? So basically, the seeds contain embryo and cotyledons in them, where cotyledons provide food to the growing embryo. And these seeds contain what in them? They have an embryo, and during the developmental stage of the embryo, plumule and radical structures are formed. First, radical is formed, which later develops into root, and plumule is formed, which develops into shoot. Clear? And the seeds also have a seed coat. A wall of the seed is called the seed coat. Okay. I'll explain why there is seed coat in the next slides. But I hope you understood this slide where we talked about what actually the seed contains in it. And seed is a product which is formed after fertilization. It is a post fertilization product formed from ovule. Ovule develops into seed, and the seed contains this embryo or the developing zygote in it. And when the zygote is developing into embryo, who is providing nourishment to the embryo? Cotyledons. Clear? And as the embryo is developing, first radical is formed, later plumule is formed. Radical develops into root and the plumule develops into shoot. And once the root and shoot are formed, slowly the first leaves will form. And these leaves perform photosynthesis and provide the food to the plant. Clear? And seeds are also surrounded by a tough coating, that is seed coat. And seeds are they are quite diverse in their nature. They are different in their color, in their shape, and even in their size. And different plants or different fruits have different number of seeds in them. Okay. Now coming to dispersal of seeds. Okay. What is meant by dispersal? Dispersal means distribution of seeds from one place to another, or distribution of seeds away from parent plant. Even that can be a correct definition. Okay. Like, let us assume you have a field, and here you have, let's assume, okay, tomato plant. Okay. Or if there is a field and you have, this is mango tree. Okay. Now let's assume the seeds fell on the ground closer to the mother plant, and again you find small saplings developing from the seeds. Here also the tomato plant, the seeds again fall here only, let's assume. And from the seeds, germination takes place, and you can see plants developing. Now, all these are your tomato plants, and here you have your mango plants, right? Now, what happens is these plants won't grow properly. Why? Because all the seeds are very close to each other, and there is overcrowding. Okay. And there is high competition. Competition for what? Competition for nutrients in the soil, competition for water in the soil, competition for light, competition for space. So the plants can't grow. In order to avoid this competition, there is distribution of the seeds far away from the mother plant. But seeds, can they walk? No. So that's the reason they also need agents so that the seeds can be dispersed to different areas. Like, for example, do you ever find hibiscus only in your locality? That's not the case, right? You find hibiscus flowers in Hyderabad, like if you consider the, like you see hibiscus flowers not only in Hyderabad, right? Or not only in Telangana state. It's found even in Karnataka or Kerala. Though there might be of different species, but you find them, right? How is that possible? That's because of dispersal of the seeds. Or mango trees, you find them. not only in one particular state, but throughout India, though the species might vary again. That's because of dispersal. Okay, dispersal means distribution of seeds. And why is it very important for distribution of the seeds? So that there is no overcrowding for the resources present in the soil. So that is what I have depicted in this picture. You have a tomato plant, for example, all the seeds of this tomato plant fell in the same soil. Then what happens? There will be overcrowding, there will be more competition. Competition for what? Competition for the nutrients in the soil, competition for water in the soil, competition for light, competition for space. To avoid this competition, nature has evolved this dispersal mechanism. What is dispersal? Distribution of seeds. Now try to understand, when I explained you about this slide, functions of a fruit, I explained you that how fruits help in protection of seed and how they play a role in storing food material. Fruits also help in dispersal of seeds. That means fruits only carry the seeds in them and help in seeing that the seeds are transferred from one place to another. Okay, they're carrying the seeds in them. They're include, like fruits, the seeds are enclosed inside the fruits, right? So basically the seeds help in dispersal means distribution of the seeds away from the parent plant. And in this slide I'll explain about the seed coat. Now try to understand, the seeds have to be dispersed from one region to another region. Okay, when they have to be dispersed from one region to another region, obviously the climatic conditions in both the regions won't be same. Like for example, if there is a seed which is present in Telangana and it got dispersed into regions of Andhra, borders of Andhra, okay, will the climatic conditions be same? Not really, right? And during this process there are chances that the seeds can get destroyed either by stamping or by animals. So, to protect the seed from such unfavorable conditions, either physical conditions or environmental conditions, the seed has a very tough seed coat. Clear? And dispersal is very important to prevent overcrowding or competition. Not only that, one reason is to prevent competition or overcrowding. The second reason is we can see plant species getting distributed throughout the world. It is not so that mangoes are found only in one particular locality. No, they are quite distributed throughout the world. That's because of dispersal of seeds. Okay. Now I told you seeds do, can they, are they motile? No. So there should be some agents which help in dispersal of the seeds. So first is wind. If you remember when we were talking about pollination, where there should be some agents for the transfer of pollen grains onto the stigma, because pollen grains, they are again non-motile, so that's the reason they are transferred by pollinators. If wind helps in pollination, you call it as anemophily. But if wind helps in seed dispersal, then you call it as anemo. Anemo means wind. Chory for for dispersal of seeds. When if wind is being used as an agent for dispersal of seeds, you use the term anemochory. Anemo, why? Because wind means anemo. Okay, chory for seed dispersal. Okay. Now, the seeds which are dispersed by wind, again they have certain properties. What are they? That what are those? They must be in lightweight, otherwise wind can't carry them. And most of the seeds which are dispersed by wind, they either have wings or they have tufts of hair. As you can see here, this is drumstick seeds. Okay, these are drumstick seeds. Can you see wing like structures surrounding the seed? Okay, and this wing like structures help in easy dispersal of the seeds in the wind. Okay, here you can see cotton seeds. Can you see the cotton fibers surrounding the seeds? They help in again easy dispersal, the hair like structures. And these are the hair like structures in the seeds of sal tree. Okay, sal plant. And these are seeds of hiptage, or sometimes they also call it as helicopter seeds. Okay, helicopter seeds, where the seeds have this special wing like shapes. Can you see? Thus helping in easy dispersal through wind. Basically, main characteristics of the seeds which have to be dispersed by wind are they must be in lightweight, and secondly, they have this either wing like structures for easy movement in air, overcoming the air resistance, or they have hair-like structures. Clear? Examples include drumstick, cotton, okay, saltry, hiptage. These are the examples. Okay. Again, I'm repeating. If wind is used as an agent for pollination, we use the word anemo. Even if wind is used as agent for dispersal of seed, you use the word anemo. Then what is the difference? If it is for for dispersal of seeds, we use the word chori. Okay, anemochory. That means using wind as agent of dispersal for seeds. For pollination, we use the term phylly. If through wind there is transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma, then you use the term anemophily. Here we are talking about dispersal of seeds, so it will be cody. Okay. Now, the second agent is water. So, since water is being used as the agent, you use the term hydro. And since it is for dispersal of seeds, the term used is hydrochory. Okay. And here, what should be the adaptations of the seeds, or what are the features of the seeds which are dispersed by water? Mostly the plants which grow surrounding to the water bodies, they are dispersed by water. Okay. Example, coconut, lotus. In coconut, the outer coat of the seed is usually fibrous, and in lotus, the outer coat is spongy. Okay, the spongy nature of the outer seeds of lotus help them to float on the water body, as a result of which, with the help of water currents, the seeds get carried away to various regions of the globe. Okay, so just like how water currents help in pollination, here also water currents help in dispersal of the seeds. But the seeds should not sink, no, they should float on the water. So for that, they have this spongy outer coat, or they might have this fibrous outer coat as seen in coconut. Okay, and if water is being used as agent for seed dispersal, we use the term hydrochory. Okay. Next is explosion, also known as autochory. Auto means self. Here in these plants, the plants don't take help of anyone. Okay, they do by themselves. They do the dispersal of seeds by themselves. Best example is castor seeds and balsam seeds. Can you see the beautiful castor seeds? They have such nice color and beautiful texture, right? I mean, the designs also. The texture of the seed is quite smooth, and the colors also, like you can see the combination of brown along with uh, skinish color or yellowish color, and you can see the various patterns on the castor seeds. So in castor and balsam, the dispersal of the seeds is without any agent. The plant itself does the dispersal. How? Now if you see here, the fruits are green in color, that means in the early stage. But as the fruits they dry, okay, then what happens? The fruit dries and splits open. It opens by itself. Okay, just like how a pista nut cracks. Oh, you know pista nut, right? In order to get the fruit out of the pista, you crack it open. In the same way here, what happens is as the fruit dries, the fruit cracks, it opens and it releases the seeds into the atmosphere, and these uh, thus, they fall in at different regions and they grow into plant. The same thing happens with balsam. Can you see how the fruit is? And once it starts drying, you can see that the seeds start falling. Okay, so it's self-dispersal. Therefore, it is called autochory. And during this process, what actually happens? The fruit it dries and it explodes, releasing out the seeds. Hence, the name explosion or autochory. Clear? Examples are seeds of castor and balsam, where the fruits dry and they burst open, releasing the seeds. And finally, there is one more agent of dispersal of seed, that is animals. Hence, we use the term zoochory, where animals are involved in dispersal of seeds. How animals help in dispersal of seeds? One way is uh, some animals, what they do is they eat the fruit, and these seeds cannot be digested in their body. So what happens? The seeds get excreted out in their poop, and once this gets excreted, the seeds they germinate depending on the regions where the excreta of the bird is found or the animal is found. Are you understanding? Some animals, they feed on the fruit. The fruit gets digested. What happens to the seeds? They are not digested, they are undigested. Undigested food material, what happens? It is removed from the body of the animal as excreta. And when the animals excrete, the seeds, they germinate. Okay, so that is one way how animals help in uh, seed dispersal. The second way how animals help in seed dispersal is, if you see, we eat mangoes, right? After we eat mangoes, we throw the seeds. Some people, what they do is they plant the seeds in their garden. If they have a garden, they plant the seeds. And some people, what they do, they throw in that. Or if you eat papaya, the seeds are thrown. Or if you eat watermelon, those seeds are thrown. Now these, when you are throwing them, then even that is a chance where they get dispersed to various regions. And if there are favorable conditions, then the seeds can germinate and grow into a plantlet. That's how we can basically disperse the seeds of mango, watermelon, or papaya. That's how human beings do the dispersal of seeds, where human beings eat away the fleshy part of the fruit, and then they throw the seeds at distant places. Or some animals, they eat the fruit, the seeds remain undigested, as a result of which they get excreted out. And when there are favorable conditions, the seeds will germinate. The third way how animals help in seed dispersal is, some seeds, they have spines on their surface. Can you see these structures? Okay, or hook like structures. Can you see hook like structures? Now, what happens is, have you ever observed, if you take your pet to a garden, and when your dog goes through the bushes, sometimes there are few seeds which get stuck onto its fur. Have you ever observed? Or even to your cat, those seeds get stuck. Why? Because in these plants, the fruits have spine like structures, or hook like, or the seeds have hook like appendages, or they might be very needle shaped. Here you can see the seeds of spear grass. These are seeds of cockle burr, or you call it as xanthium. These are seeds of tiger nail plant. Okay, so in these plants, basically, or seeds of urena, here these seeds have this spine-like structures, hook-like structures, or small hair-like structures, as a result of which they get stuck to the bodies of animals. Now, what happens? These animals walk, they move to different places, and when they move to different places, the seeds which get carried on their body, they get released. They might get released, and that's how dispersal takes place. Dispersal of seeds happens. So seeds are also non-motile, and these are products after fertilization. Ovules basically develop into seeds, and ovules have the embryo in it, which later develops into plantlet. And since seeds are non-motile, they have to be dispersed. They have to be distributed from one place to another with the help of agents. And why is seed dispersal necessary? In order to prevent competition between the same species. Secondly, to see that the that particular kind of plant is not limited to one region, but it is found throughout the globe. Okay, so what are the agents that help in seed dispersal? Either it can be wind, known as anemochory, or animals, zoochory, or water, hydrochory, or sometimes the plant itself, uh, uh, like the fruit dries and itself explodes the seed, and that process is called explosion or autochory, self dispersal. Okay, so basically, in this video, I have in detail discussed about the second step of reproduction, that is what is fertilization, and we have discussed about the products after fertilization. One is fruit, which contains the fruit wall and the seed in it, and we have discussed about the functions of fruit and seeds, how seeds have the baby plant or the embryo in it, and the cotyledons provide nourishment to the seeds. And why seed dispersal is quite important, what actually is seed dispersal, and why is it very important, and who is doing this seed dispersal. The agents can be wind, water, or the plant itself, or it can be animals. Now let's understand finally functions of plants. So we have seen entirely all the parts in a plant comprising the root system and the shoot system. If you remember, in the shoot system, we talked about leaves, stems, flowers, fruits, and we discussed in detail about all of these parts, their modifications, their functions. So, as a whole, what actually are the functions of a plant? Plants provide food. Yes, most of the green plants they perform photosynthesis, right? And plants, green plants, they are basically producers. They make their own food, and we depend on plants for our food. So they provide food to us, right? Second, they release oxygen. Yes, if you remember, I told you during this process of photosynthesis, what do plants do? They take in carbon dioxide with stomata, using stomata, absorb the water using their chlorophyll pigment and sunlight. Okay, what happens? Glucose is formed, energy is released, and oxygen is produced. This glucose, excess glucose, gets converted into starch. If you remember, we even discussed an experiment to prove that starch is present inside green portions of leaves. And we also talked about how Jan Ingenhouse, he was the scientist who proved that plants perform respiration during the dark and photosynthesis during daytime. Please rewatch, or if you have watched my videos, do rewatch for a quick recapitulation, or do watch my videos, part 1 to 4 of Unit 3, from the playlist. Okay, grade 6 CBSE or ICSE. I'll link it in the description, so do watch it. So during this process of photosynthesis, basically plants utilize carbon dioxide and water, release energy, glucose, and oxygen. And we can't remain even for a second without oxygen, right? This we have seen especially during the season of COVID, where we were in dire need of oxygen, right? So not only during the season of COVID, we can't survive without oxygen, right? Even for a second. So who is actually providing this oxygen? uh, Plants. So we are quite dependent on plants for food and even for doing our daily activities. And plants provide wood, timber, and paper. Plants provide paper, and timber is needed for furniture. Wood is needed in order to perform cooking, like in rural areas. Even now, it's a practice that people use wood for construction of houses, and they use wood for cooking, right? And we use timber for constructing furniture, like even for chairs, tables, right? We use timber. And paper is something which we use daily, even for textbooks, notebooks, for any rough thing we use paper, right? So that's the reason people say never waste paper, because trees are usually cut to produce these papers. So it's better to recycle the papers and reuse if you are doing some rough work or something of that sort, right? So basically, what are the functions of plants? Plants are major producers. We depend on plants for our food, and during the process of photosynthesis, they release oxygen, and we utilize that oxygen and release carbon dioxide and perform our process of respiration. And plants do provide wood, timber, and paper. So it's very important, or quite important, for us to conserve plants. Since we are completely dependent on plants, it's better to find alternatives instead of cutting plants, right? So that ends the entire unit, structure and functions of a plant, Unit 3, which have discussed it as 5 parts, where the first part includes root system. The second includes the shoot system, where I talked about the stem. Third includes the leaf, where we discussed in detail about the functions, modifications of leaf in general plants, normal plants, and even modifications of leaf in insectivorous plants. The fourth part, we discussed about the flower, reproductive organ, about its structures, about its various worlds present in the flower, and we discussed the first step of fertilization, so the first step of reproduction, which is pollination. And in today's video, which is part 5, we discussed about the second step of reproduction, which is fertilization. We talked about the products after fertilization, that is fruits and seeds, and discussed about seed dispersal and functions of a plant. So that comes to an end, where in detail have discussed completely about the structure and functions of a plant. If you have any doubt, please feel free to comment it down below. Do watch all the parts for better understanding. I'll link the videos in the description. If you have any doubts, feel free to comment it down below. And if you like my content, please do like, share, and subscribe to my channel, Biology Foundation. So, tomorrow, let's summarize whatever we learned in this unit and try to solve a few multiple choice questions. Okay? So, until then, take care. Bye bye. Have a good day.